So I'm Chris Brown. Thank you everyone for joining us today at this session. I'm Head of Public Sector for PHS Group. I'm joined today by my colleagues Kasim and Ashley. Gentlemen, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks Chris. Good afternoon everyone. My name's Ashley Shields. I work for PHS. I head up the air treatment division at PHS.
Thanks Ashley.
And afternoon, everyone. From myself, my name is Kasim Arshad. I'm the Sales and Marketing Director for Biozone Scientific across the EMEA region.
Lovely. Thank you, Kasim. Thanks, guys. So today's session is entitled Hands, Face and Space, but what about the air we breathe? So the topic really is, all about air quality within the working environment, the school environment. So with that in mind, I'm going to kick off the kind of roundtable with a question for the chaps. But if anyone's got questions, obviously, please feel free to either use the chat function or to just jump in and ask us a question live. So I guess first question for you both is, what challenges and opportunities has the kind of COVID-19 pandemic brought up for air quality and air treatment for you guys? What's been happening?
I think it's fair to say that COVID's probably changed the way that people look at airborne viruses and air quality in general. And I think now recently it's been proven without doubt that the most common way the virus is transmitted is through the air. Mm-hmm. So I think one of the biggest challenges as we move forward, Chris, is getting people into indoor settings as safely as possible. So whether it's a school, a bar, restaurant, office setting, people want to know what measures are in place to deal with that airborne threat now.
Yeah.
And I think there's lots of commentary out there from regulatory and scientific authorities such as the CDC and in the US and SAGE, our own government scientists, highlighting that HEPA filtration and air purifiers are a solution for dealing with the airborne threat of COVID-19.
Okay. Thanks Ashley. And Kasim, sort of same question for yourself.
Yeah, similar really to mimic what Ashley just said. Obviously, global demand, global increase across the board for our business. I suppose it's wrong to say, considering when COVID has affected so many people personally, myself included, but the stars were aligned when you represent a business that works in the field of air and surface disinfection, and then you have a global pandemic. It stands to reason that you'll do fairly well. I think just to mimic those points, increased awareness is something that I've got written down, but also more importance has been placed on tackling these issues than anything else. Previously, they were seen as if we get a chance to do it, we will do it, and now it's come to the forefront much more. And I think Ashley's probably seen similar results across the board with Airmax across three main sectors for us. Anyway, it was across healthcare, so hospitals, etc. You've got elderly care, so that's included in that. But also then obviously education and schools being the sector that's essentially remained open as much as it feasibly can.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, guys. And just touching on that then, so one of the things that I found in my role as head of public sector is a lot of schools and colleges, universities are concerned about the perception of air safety, of being able to see these products actually working. Is that something that you can actually see on an Airmax, a Biozone? And we'll touch a bit on how they actually work in a moment. But the perception is really important, Ashley, in getting people back into buildings, but also to making people feel safe. Can you see the machines working? How's that work?
Yeah, the Airmax has got a couple of models, but one of the models actually tells you how clean the air is, and the unit's cleaning the air. So some businesses out there want to give, and education is typical of that, want to give their staff, visitors, students comfort that they're taking as many measures as they can to make them as safe as possible. And I think one of our models, the PureView, which actually demonstrates how clean the air is and shows when the air cleaning, sort of fits into that space really.
Great, thanks.
I think from our perspective, unfortunately, there's no digital display on any of our systems to say how much it's actually doing. But I think it's a good place to pause for a second and see where our business was prior to COVID and where it is now. Historically, the reason for installation of our units has always been odor related. So our units are fantastic at removing odor, particularly in boys' washrooms, in schools, etc. And the reason behind that is because they provide air and surface disinfection. Whereas before everybody saw them as odor neutralizers, now there's the added benefit that not only do they get rid of the odor, but they're also providing that element of air and surface disinfection as well. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, guys. So we've talked a little bit about the potential solutions. Can you kind of explain a bit more about how an Airmax or a Biozone works? What's available in terms of your products? How do they work?
So within PHS, we've got two products that clean the air effectively, the Biozone and the Airmax. The Airmax, with the Airmax, the air is taken through a filtration process. So there's a fan and a motor which sucks dirty air into the unit at a high rate, at a fast speed. This dirty air is then cleaned through a series of filters to remove the contaminants from the air. So first of all, you've got a pre-filter which captures the bigger particles. You've then got a carbon filter which removes odour and also what we call volatile organic compounds. And then the third filter is the key at the moment when we're talking about the pandemic. The third filter is a HEPA filter, which captures the smaller particles like germs, viruses and bacteria. And it's actually been tested and proven to be effective at capturing both the H1N1 flu virus and more recently and importantly human coronavirus. So this dirty air that I talked about is then reintroduced into the room as clean filtered air, free of airborne contaminants. There's some sensor technology and stuff that I can go through around air changes and that, but I wanted to just keep it high level at the moment. But if anyone wants any more detail on that, we can give them that additional detail.
Okay.
But essentially, it's filtration, removes the contaminants from the air.
Right. Okay. Great. Thanks. And you mentioned volatile organic compounds, VOCs, right?
Right. Yeah, VOCs. They're basically liquids or solids that turn to gas at room temperature, and they can be a major cause of allergic reactions. So you open a tin of paint, the smell you get is a VOC. The best personal example I can give you is scented candles.
Okay.
When you burn scented candles, certain candles give me a headache, and that's my allergic reaction to the VOCs that the candles are putting out there. And the carbon filter actually takes those contaminants out of the air.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And Kasim, the Biozone, which is obviously a different product, but what does that do?
It's usually very sciencey, so again, I'll try and keep it very high level. Usually I do this with a slide, so please bear with me, everybody. But basically, we operate on a two-step disinfection process. So the first is using ultraviolet light. As the fan draws air and impurities inside the chamber, it's exposed to a high-powered UVC lamp, which provides the first element of disinfection. But because we know that we're not going to be able to force all of the air within a space through a tiny fan like that, we need to rely on a secondary form of disinfection, and that's through the generation of a substance called photoplasma. Now, the way that photoplasma is created is essentially a reaction between UV and the air. So we take oxygen, O2, and water particulates in the air. We simply charge them up. As they're being charged up, they break into small pieces and bash into each other. When they bash into each other, they create a series of byproducts, if you like, intentional byproducts, but byproducts. One of them being ozone.
Mm-hmm.
So ozone is O3. It's basically charged up oxygen with an extra O attached to oxygen. We also have negative ions being generated, which weigh down impurities in the air so they become easier to clean on surfaces. And the key component of photoplasma is something we refer to as OH, otherwise known as hydroxyl free radicals, which carry the same disinfection properties as your conventional peroxides and bleaches, but without the chemical byproduct. So all of our tech is completely chemical free. Because of the fact that we generate a substance called ozone, however, we are governed by EU regulations when it comes to maximum ozone exposure limits. Just to preempt that, we are completely safe and we abide by all regulations. However, that's the reason why our units are only suitable, if you like, for transient areas within a commercial building. So, such as a school, for example, for the washrooms, corridors, changing rooms, our units are absolutely fine. But for your permanently occupied spaces, such as your offices and your classrooms, you'd be looking at an Airmax type solution because that would be the appropriate choice.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Kasim. That's helped clear that up, because my next question was going to be where would you advise placing these units, because they do very different jobs, don't they? Or they do similar jobs but in a different way, perhaps, is a better way of putting it. So I think you've cleared up where the Biozone would go. So washroom, transient areas, changing rooms, that kind of thing.
Corridors, that
corridors.
sort of thing.
Yeah. And then, Ashley, very much the Airmax would be a classroom-based solution or an office-based solution. Is that?
Yeah, exactly that. Where people spend a little more time.
Okay.
So exactly that.
And that goes back to the fact that that's just cleaning and filtering the air on a constant basis.
It's simply removing contaminants from the air. One of the important things when you're looking at air cleaners or air purifiers as well is the airflow. The airflow is really important. The higher the airflow, the quicker you can clean the air effectively. So we tend to recommend a minimum of 3 air changes every hour. So the whole volume of air cleaned in a room once every 20 minutes. Now, some industries need significantly higher air changes. For example, dentists, since the pandemic, need to achieve 10 air changes per hour between patients. So, in a normal setting, classroom, office, you're looking at 3 air changes. Dentists, because they're putting significantly more aerosols into the air, they need significantly more air changes.
Right, thank you. So we're saying in a classroom environment, the Airmax would change all of the air in that classroom 3 times.
Yeah, a minimum of 3 times. It can change it as many times as you want, but there are economical considerations, and the manufacturer's recommendation is a minimum of 3.
Brilliant, thanks. And that's with people in the room. That's live. That's
with people in the room, because the premise behind it is, look, when we breathe, we're putting tiny aerosols into the air. If they're not removed, they tend to stay in the air,
right,
and infect people hours later. So that the premise is, let's clean the air as quickly as possible.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, you kind of teed up my next question, which was the current government advice, which is opening a window for ventilation. So obviously they're very keen on the hands, face and space, and then ventilation guidance is open a window. I know from my own personal experience, my brother-in-law is a primary school teacher, and he said that's created a couple of problems for him in his school. One, a uniform problem where the kids are now allowed to wear coats. And he said, you change a rule or you modify a rule a bit, and then people start to take a bit of an advantage of it. And then the other one was more of a practical consideration. He said that on a windy day, the papers blow all over the classroom, and it's just a nuisance, basically. But really, how effective is that advice? How effective is it just to open a window?
Okay, it's a solution that can add value and will add value, as it can dilute the prevalence of the viruses in the air. But for it to be really effective, there are too many variables. So weather is a big impact. So temperature, wind direction will also have an impact. And the reason temperature has an impact is because cold air is denser than warm air. So the temperature differentials between indoor and outdoor air need to be quite significant for it to have any real impact. The other problem with the advice is that for it to be at its most effective, the air needs to come in through an open window or door on one side and follow through and go out of an open door or window on the other side. But that open door or window really should be to the outside as well, because otherwise, if it's to a door in a corridor, you're just transferring the contamination to another part of the building.
I see, right. So you really want one window open on one side of the building and another window open on the other side.
In the same room.
To create an airflow.
Exactly that.
Right.
And I think we also need to remember that opening windows can cause other problems. Lots of schools are located in the vicinity of major roads. So while trying to solve one problem, we're potentially increasing the levels of harmful gases like nitrogen dioxide and also diesel particulates and bringing pollen in the spring and summer. There'll be children and staff that have allergic reactions. So while trying to solve one problem, potentially you're exacerbating another.
Yeah, sure. And if that, those VOCs that you've mentioned, does the Airmax capture those as well?
Yeah. So it doesn't capture nitrogen dioxide. Okay, but the diesel particulates it will. You need a certain it's quite an expensive process, which is why the idea is to reduce traffic rather than deal with the nitrogen dioxide in the air, because it's quite an expensive process to remove it.
Great, thank you.
And also from an energy perspective as well, I suppose the opening of windows, I mean, we don't have much of a British summer, unfortunately. It's a couple of weeks and then it's gone. So the heating costs associated with repeatedly opening of windows, etc., but also obviously the risk of increase of colds as well for young children. It's similar to advice, to be honest, in terms of what's been replicated by governments around Europe is what we found. Spain in particular, very bureaucratic when it comes to these kind of things. Spain as an economy, as in most of the economies around the world, has been crippled by COVID, of course. But because Spain is so heavily reliant on tourism, what we found is that they are trying to make cost-saving measures wherever they can, and this was introduced almost as a cost-saving element rather than it's actually going to make a massive difference.
Right.
So yeah.
Thanks, gentlemen. Thanks very much. And so just sort of focusing on this for a minute. So with an Airmax or a Biozone, less for a Biozone because we wouldn't be putting them in classrooms, but with an Airmax, how would that interact actually with, say an existing HVAC system? Would that still work?
Yeah, so it wouldn't, one wouldn't adversely affect the other. The primary reason for air handling units in HVAC systems is to remove indoor air and replace it with the air outside to reduce CO2 levels.
Right.
Okay, and whilst doing that, again, also dilute the presence of airborne viruses, provided it delivers sufficient air changes. What you'll find, some older HVAC systems or air handling units won't provide sufficient air handling, sufficient air changes to dilute the virus significantly enough. But what no air handling unit does, certainly some of the older ones, they don't actually properly clean the air and remove viruses. So again, it's more about dilution,
right, okay,
than removal, which is still, let's make no bones about it. It's better than nothing,
mm-hmm.
but it's not as effective as actually cleaning the air.
Great, thank you. And Kasim, would that have would it impact on where you'd put Biozone or not really? It's not a washrooms.
In terms of from a HVAC perspective, you'd want to try and keep, if you've got an extract point, you'd want to try and keep that away from the siting of the Biozone air care system, because the plasma that's being produced, we want it to fill the space, basically. And if it's filling the space but you've got a vent directly next to it, the plasma might just get sucked straight out and it won't provide that element of ongoing air and surface disinfection. So I think placement's key with where you put our units or where you site them.
That's a really good point. And how do you place your these, where would you put an Airmax, where do you put a Biozone? We know the application is a washroom or a classroom, but are they wall mounted? Are they freestanding? How do they actually work?
So from a Biozone perspective, yeah, the air care is a wall mounted product or a ceiling mounted product, depending on if you don't have those removable ceiling panels, because you don't want it falling on somebody's head, of course, health and safety. But you could site it on a wall, above head height, predominantly if it's a washroom, for example, over the problem area itself, because what we want is the plasma to disperse from the unit, fall on top of the urinals, if it's the urinals that are the problem area, or the WCs, and to be able to provide that ongoing air and surface disinfection. That's what's going to tackle your odor as well as providing the element of disinfection.
Okay, and do you have like are they all wall mounted, or do you do a variant on the wall?
So we do so the Biozone Air Care is one product that we do through PHS Group. The other product that we do through PHS Group also is called a mini power zone. It's basically a portable version of an air care. Essentially, the ingredients are the same, the technology is exactly the same. It's just a ramped up version of the air care, but mobile. So if you've got an area that you want to provide ad hoc air and surface disinfection, or I don't know, somebody's been sick on site and it's been cleaned up, but that odor that you can't get rid of or something else, you plug the unit in, you leave it in for half an hour. Nobody can be present while it's on. That's just part of the safety around the use of the unit. But you seal the area off that you want to treat, set it for half an hour, let it do its business, and after half an hour it will automatically switch off. You then come back in, you air the windows out, open the windows, allow a bit of air to come in, and after that it's completely safe to return to the area itself, and it would have got rid of your odor issue as well.
Lovely, thank you. Thanks for the example as well. That was lovely. And Ashley, a question for yourself about the Airmax. Are they all wall-mounted products, or?
Yeah, the majority of units that PHS provide are wall-mounted. So in a classroom environment, that's ideal because you don't want them on the floor where the children, particularly in primary schools, can mess with the units. So yeah, wall-mounted. There is a mobile solution that can be used. I think the big difference between the mini Biozone and the Airmax is the Airmax can be in the room while it's cleaning. So in a care home environment, for example, it could stay in the room with the resident. Now, the one thing it doesn't, it only cleans the air though, so it doesn't clean surfaces. So if you want something that cleans surfaces from a mobile perspective, the mini Biozone is a go-to solution really. The Airmax is all about the air and cleaning the air quickly.
Yeah, and I think as an integrated solution, I think both units have their absolute value. I think this shouldn't be looked at, it's one or the other. I think if you're looking at it from a perspective of providing the best form of solution all round, absolutely for your inhabited spaces, Airmax is 110% the solution. And then if you've got odor issues ad hoc or other areas around site, that's where the Biozone would absolutely come into it as well. So yeah.
Great, thanks. And I was going to ask, so I think you've answered the question, but I've got a question for you, which is basically, it doesn't replace, does it, what schools and academies are already doing? So in terms of cleaning, deep cleaning, surface cleaning, hand sanitizer, this is in addition to?
Yeah, I think it's and the more that I'm out there talking to schools and businesses, they're starting to look at longer term hygiene strategies. So, I don't think hand cleaning and surface cleaning and cleaning the air is going to go away. So it needs to be almost a triangulation of all of them to provide the most effective solution. It's not just about cleaning surfaces in isolation or hand washing in isolation or cleaning the air in isolation. It's about a triangulation of all three and providing the safest environments that you can, I think.
So you see it very much as kind of like a longer term strategy, not just to COVID, but also to future pandemics as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And presumably, Kasim, similar.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing. We endorse our units as an additional enhancement to cleaning regimes already in place. What we're saying is that if you continue to socially distance, wear masks, hand sanitize, etc., and on top of that, you add in these measures that we've spoken about today, it's absolutely the safest you can be, given the circumstances.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think I've got one more question for you, actually, or possibly two. The Airmax Biozone, do they do anything, in addition to just, cleaning the air or cleaning the surfaces? Is there a well-being angle to this as well, or, is there another impact?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's well acknowledged, Chris, that cleaner indoor air improves cognitive health. So things like concentration and recall, and research proves that. But I think it's less well known that research also shows that there's a strong link between long-term exposure to particulate contamination and things like heart disease, and also it can be a contributory factor to type 2 diabetes. So there's lots of longer-term health impact of poor indoor air that cleaning the air can reduce. The world, as an example, the World Health Organization did some research probably 5 or 6 years ago now, demonstrating categorically that improved indoor air improves concentration levels and productivity by as much as 11%. Right. So it can give noticeable gains, both in we're talking a classroom environment here, so definitely in a learning environment. So there's lots of research out there to back up the fact that better indoor air quality improves overall well-being.
Excellent, thank you. My last question before we open up to those who've attended the session is, with vaccinations and the social distancing going, the other measures in place proving so effective now, with COVID infection rates dropping. I think I saw something in the paper today about nearly 40 million people live in an area where COVID infection rates are almost zero. Why do we need to invest in air purification? Well, I think it's a question that people might be thinking about. So why do you need to invest in these things?
I think you touched on it earlier, actually, Chris. It's not just about COVID. It's not just about coronavirus. It's about having a long-term sustainable hygiene strategy, and that includes clean air. And as I said, I think you touched on it previously. I think the benefits are clear in terms of reducing staff absenteeism in an office environment, increasing productivity and cognitive recall, and actually demonstrating to your staff, visitors, parents, students that you're actually interested in their well-being. And again, you said it earlier, there's already talk that we should now be preparing for the next pandemic. And this forms part of that, really. Yeah,
definitely.
I think from my perspective, if I look at it from an overall point of view, unfortunately, there's only so much cleaning that you can do. There comes a limit to that. And having a product like an Airmax, for example, inside a classroom scenario, which is continually cleaning the air ongoing, and then if you look at it from outside of the classroom perspective, to have a Biozone unit potentially providing air and surface disinfection with a side benefit of odor control, I think that there comes a limit as to how much you can clean, but these units, this tech is continually providing that as an additional measure on top. And I think given the current circumstance, and like you both have said, moving forward, unfortunately, I don't think we've seen the last of this. I think the world has completely changed compared to what it was prior to COVID. Measures are going to be put in place now to try and keep people safe, even from the conventional common cold and flu. The numbers are stark when you look at it in news reports in terms of the average death rate for the common cold. COVID has basically amplified that now. And it's not only the risks posed in schools, but it's the risk of what the school children potentially take back home and then onto elderly relatives, etc. That's going to be the focus moving forward as well.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate you answering my questions. Just opening it up to the people who've attended. Does anyone have any questions at all for Asli or Kazim at all? Possibly not. If there are any questions, we're very happy to send information to people who get in touch with us, obviously if they've got a particular question for their organisation. But if you've got anything you want to send through on chat or comment on now, that'd be great. If not, then I think we'll look to close the session.
Can I ask a little bit about the filters?
Of course,
it seems to me there's quite a burden of time in managing filters. If you've got a secondary school that's got 900 pupils in it with numerous classrooms, how many times do people have to change these filters, and how are they considered contaminated?
So, yeah, good question. Thank you for that. PHS provide a service where we install and change the filters. So we take that task away from you, and it's the same with Biozone. Biozone's got a lamp in that we service on an annual basis. So it's an annual service normally in a classroom environment. The filters twofold. The HEPA filter has an antimicrobial coating, so it restricts the growth. So one of the things that it will capture is mold and bacteria. The antimicrobial coating on the HEPA filter restricts growth, and the mold and bacteria will die off within a day or so. In terms of viruses need a host to survive. So once the filter captures the virus, the virus dies off again very quickly. So we advise our guys to change the filters with PPE, because the machines can also get very dusty when you open them up. But in terms of changing the filters, very safe. In terms of maintenance, we do all that for you. Has that answered your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Great. Sorry, I missed the end of that because I got kicked out due to poor internet connection. So apologies from the chairperson of the round table getting kicked out of his own discussion. Sorry about that. Yeah, great question. Thank you very much for that, Fiona. Any other questions at all from anyone? No. Well, in that case, thank you all very much for attending. Ashley and Kasim, thanks so much for your input. And I was actually taking quite a lot of notes, learning quite a lot myself there. So thanks very much, guys, and see you soon.
Thank
No
you.
problem. Thank you.